All right, hello everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar and let people join but try to respect everybody's time here. So hello and thank you so much for joining us for today's Technology 101 webinar session. My name is Kyle Hodges and I am an Assistant Director for Business and Technology in the UVA Career Center. We are planning these sessions throughout the summer to serve as an introduction to careers in technology. And I also want to make sure that I tell you that my colleagues in the business and technology community at UVA are planning similar webinars for the summer, and you can find those in Handshake. In fact, we have one tomorrow for human capital consulting and one on Monday for commercial banking. So if you are interested in those, go ahead and check those out as well. But today we're super excited to have Jonathan Day, who graduated from UVA in 2016 with degrees in foreign affairs and global commerce. He is currently a product specialist at Facebook. And I'm going to ask Jonathan some questions about his background and career. And you all feel free to ask questions throughout the session as well through the Zoom chat, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. So Jonathan, I'd love for you just to start off by introducing yourself, including your current role and company, and a little bit about your time at UVA and maybe how you landed at Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely. So super excited to be here. Thank you, Kyle, and everyone for putting this together. As a person who graduated a couple of years ago, it really matters that I get to continue to connect with the UVA community. So really excited to do that today. My name is Jonathan. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., and I graduated from UVA in 2016. Kyle alluded to this earlier, but my major was in foreign affairs and my minor was in global commerce. So I had a little bit of a qualitative, quantitative background there. After I graduated from UVA, I worked at Deloitte Consulting from 2016 to 2018 in their strategy and operations practice. And then I was recruited on LinkedIn by Facebook for a position in their risk and response practice as an escalation specialist. So for those of you who don't know, it's kind of a high-level policy analyst / an internal tool product manager. It's a bit of a weird role. And there's actually a really funny story about how I got recruited, which I'll tell you if we have some time. And then after about a little less than a year in that role, I transferred into a product specialist role in 2019. And so far I've worked on Goodwill, which is the team that's responsible for things like friendversaries and memories. And I'm currently working on Messenger. So that is kind of my background in a nutshell. And I guess at UVA, some of the things that I were involved with were the McIntyre Investment Institute, consulting group at McIntyre. I did Building Tomorrow as well. And then I was a co-founder for Alpha Sigma Phi, the Greek fraternity. I also just want to give a full disclaimer. I'm not a full product manager. I'm what's known as kind of like a junior product manager at Facebook. So I can definitely talk a lot about product manager day-to-day work, but I don't want anyone to think that I'm like owning Messenger or Goodwill end to end. Those are like senior product manager roles, and those are held by people with tons of experience who are way more experienced than I am. But yeah, that's my background.
Awesome. So could you define product management for me and share a little bit about how you learned about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the easiest definition for a product manager is basically the CEO of a product. So if you think about Messenger, for example, there might be a core product manager or like a lead product manager that owns Messenger end to end. But more often what you'll see is product managers who own things like Messenger stories or even things like the GIF integration in the keyboard and things like that. So basically, product management includes a lot of different day-to-day tasks. Some of that's conducting research, so basically understanding expertise about the company's market, user personas and competitors, developing strategies and trying to use industry knowledge to build a high level strategic plan. There's also communicating plans with a lot of external stakeholders and internal stakeholders. That's things like partnerships, engineers, data scientists, and designers. And there's also coordinating development. So basically figuring out what are we going to put on the roadmap? What are we releasing this half? What is the customer feedback that we've been getting and how does that work into our high level strategy? And lastly, it's acting on feedback and data analysis. At the end of the day, if you don't listen to your customers and your users, then your product is just not going to be very good. Doesn't matter how good of an idea you think it is. So a lot of product management has that component built into it. And I think that's, if anything, maybe probably the most important thing is just honestly listening to your users. And I learned about product management after accidentally doing that work at Deloitte and Facebook. So When I was at Deloitte, I worked on this technology project and I ran the Scrum board. I did a lot of stakeholder analysis. I was updating roadmaps and I had no idea what that was, but I was like, oh, this is exciting. But I guess this is just kind of consulting in a nutshell. Turns out that's not actually the case. So I went over to Facebook and I kind of figured out, oh, that's product management. It led me to want to pursue that as a career and kind of get deeper into that.
Yeah, very cool. And I know we've talked about before that often our students don't know about product management that as a career path when they're in college and kind of stumble upon it later. But more and more we're learning about it earlier in their collegiate experience. Um, so what does your day to day at Facebook look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends on the day, which I realize is probably the answer that everyone will give you, but it can be anything from syncing with product and engineering teams. So we have a daily stand up where we'll go over what are our top priorities? Are there things that we need to fix, things that are top of mind? I work on existing projects, so that's usually with designers, with UXR, which for those of you who don't know is user research, data scientists, and engineers. That will usually be coordinated around a previously scoped project. I'll also usually sync with my manager a bit and try to figure out, are we aligned on our top priorities? If not, like, what do we need to do to get aligned? And lastly, I work on side projects for product operations, which is the division that I live in on Facebook. Full disclosure, that's my least favorite part of the job. That's basically just like free work that I do for Facebook because everybody has to do a little bit of free work at Facebook. But it's a good opportunity to network and to learn some new skills as well.
Cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think we have a question. Do UX people work on UI design too, or are they more statistical research? That is a really good question. I think at Facebook, UX people tend to do a lot of statistical user research. So that's things like conducting a lot of interviews, figuring out what the market is saying about a certain product, figuring out what are our gaps in terms of we think we're doing this, but it turns out users are perceiving this. UI design, I like to think of as more of something that as a designer would take care of. And I think a lot of people at Facebook are very good about being design oriented. So you might see UX people pull in their research and talk about that in a meeting and how it relates to design. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're talking about moving a certain button to a different part of the app or introducing a new flow, that's usually something a designer will take care of.
Cool. And I know you mentioned a few of the projects that you currently work on. Did you want to expand on any of those a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the projects that I work on day to day are fixing top user issues. So to give you an example, Messenger Stories is known for breaking pretty frequently. So what I see from my like data analysis is that a user will say, "Hey, like my Messenger Stories doesn't work." So what I usually will do is I'll work with engineers and data scientists to pull logging information as to like why that's not working. Is it a problem with their device? Is it a problem with, the operating system? Is a problem on our side? Maybe their cell connection's bad. So basically trying to root cause like why that's happening. And then once we figure that out, we scope out a project to fix that. So ultimately it could be something that gets fixed this half, it could be something that gets fixed in a week or two, or it could be a long-term issue and that's something that needs to get scoped out for next half or even a year. So it really depends on the issue. And in addition to that, I work on quality projects. So that's basically defining quality user experiences and setting standards for new releases. Obviously, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our products are good and that they're polished. So we need to set standards for that. And every team, every function has their own standards of quality. So oftentimes product specialists will end up taking all that information and trying to aggregate it and make it something usable for the entire team as a whole. And I also work on some side projects for my own knowledge and my own practice. So right now I'm developing an app for music creators. It's very much in its developmental stage. I'm doing it with one of my best friends from back home. But that's just kind of a fun passion project that I do on the side.
Cool. So what types of tech skills or programs are crucial in your work and you use the most?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of people, when they think of product or product managers, might think that we're like super, super good at like coding and, we're basically one step away from an engineer. It really depends on the company. At Facebook, that's really often not the case. I think at like Google, a lot of product managers are former engineers who transition, so they might be very well versed in coding. I think what's honestly the most important is just understanding technical concepts. So you don't always need to sit down and be like, yeah, I can write like X amount of code and do this myself. But knowing how to talk the talk and understand why an engineer thinks something is going to take longer than you think it will is really crucial. I also think communication skills are really important. So distilling information into bite-sized chunks and communicating a story to your stakeholders is really important. I think a lot of times, we get so much information from so many disparate sources, but we don't actually have a cohesive storyline around it, and that makes it difficult to actually get your feature fixed. SQL is also really important. So being able to cut up data and being able to like get the data yourself and make a case for why you think something is important is only going to be able to help you. So I would definitely recommend, if you're not well versed in SQL, don't worry about it. I learned it on the job in my first job, but there's a lot of really great online resources that are free where you can practice SQL skills. And it's something that, you know, it just takes a little bit of practice and it's really helpful. And then lastly, I think two really big things, and one of these is like super important right now. That's allyship skills. So when you're in the workplace and you see microaggressions and you see that women are getting interrupted in meetings, or an African American colleague is not getting his point across because someone keeps interrupting them, you need to figure out how to be a good ally and how to get them to, you know, feel comfortable in that space. So speaking up for others when they're interrupted, preventing microaggressions, and combating your own biases is really important. I think if nothing else, I really highly recommend people start working on their allyship skills in college. And then design thinking and execution skills. So that's things like understanding why something is designed a certain way. And ultimately, if you do want to propose a project to fix something, being able to execute that and execute it on a timeline and within budget is really crucial.
Great, all such good and important skills. Thank you for sharing those. So I know obviously you didn't study product management in college and you didn't have any plans to go into it while you were at UVA. But when you look back, what kinds of courses can you kind of think now that helped you, or projects that you did in the past, or even at Deloitte, kind of now benefit you as a product specialist?
Absolutely. I think I took one CS class when I was in college, and it was CS 1010, which at the time was like introduction to Microsoft Word, basically. But it was actually really interesting, and we learned a lot about HTML and CSS, and I think we learned a little bit about Python as well. It was a really great introductory course, and something that really helped me understand why technology works a certain way. So I would definitely recommend maybe taking that in like another CS class to get your feet wet. I think side projects are also really important. So that's things like building an app or even a business with your friends. It doesn't have to be the most beautiful app in the world. You don't have to create the next Twitter or the next Airbnb, but like just being able to sit down and say, hey, there's a problem in the wild, and you know, we're all smart people, and like, let's try to solve it. It just gets so much good practical experience for you. And also you just kind of learn how to develop an app, how to design something, what works, what doesn't. And that's honestly super helpful. And then kind of like I said, SQL classes and just general Python classes can be helpful. So you can find that on Skillshare or Udemy. I can't tell you how many YouTubers push like, hey, use my YouTube link for like 3 months of Skillshare free. And there's just so much good content on there. So would definitely recommend looking at that as well.
And students, I'll put a plug in for the free courses that we currently have in Coursera. There are tons of Python and SQL classes there, and the UVA library offers free courses as well for all of those skills. So thanks for that.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Seriously, UVA has a ton of great free resources. So if you don't have to pay for anything, don't.
Exactly. All right. So who are the other professionals that you typically interact with when working on a project? Like, what are their roles?
Yeah, there's a lot of functions that I interact with on a day to day. Designers are people that I interact with every single day. And a huge thing is figuring out how do you understand design. If you can understand design and care about it and learn a little bit more about it, you will be a much more effective person in the product management area. Honestly, I can't tell you the amount of times that like designers have explained why something is, you know, built the way it is, and other people don't understand that, and as a result it leads to thrash and just problems down the road. So definitely would recommend learning a little bit more about design. Engineers, obviously someone needs to build the product at the end of the day, so learning how to communicate and work with them is really crucial. Data scientists are also really great people to work with. They'll help you cut up data to figure out what the market is saying about a product, or to figure out what the top user pain points are. And anytime that you can come to your team with more data and explain why something needs to be fixed and here's why, that's only going to help you. And also UX researchers. I have a special place in my heart for UX researchers because honestly, like I think they're some of the most user-focused people at the company, and I think they do a really good job of understanding why something is a problem and communicating that and trying to get that fixed. And I think there's two other questions. Do you mind if I answer these, or should
Yeah,
we
go
go with the
for it.
prompt? What types of internships do they have at Facebook? Design, product management? Yeah, I think they have a lot of different internships. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure like which programs have what internships. I would just look on the website. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I'm super happy to try to get some more information for you or answer any questions. Uh, is it as hard to get into Facebook as people think? Yes, it's challenging. To get into Facebook or Google or Apple or Amazon, you are competing against a lot of other students and a lot of people who are smart and work hard. And that tends to happen with any large company in Silicon Valley or even outside of it in investment banking or consulting. That being said, I think the best way to get into these large companies is to meet people there and network and figure out like, hey, like what's your story? How did you get into this company? Because oftentimes people will know someone and that person can vouch for them and help them interview and get their foot in the door. And that's a much easier process than just submitting your application, and it might go into a black hole and never get reviewed. So, anytime that a company is difficult to get into, don't be discouraged. I think networking is always going to be your friend. And the more people that you can meet and talk to and figure out how did they get into that company is going to help you a lot.
So I know that you mentioned working on side projects and everything is a really good idea to gain experience. How would you suggest that a student gain some skills in product management, especially this summer when things are kind of uncertain and students are looking to gain experience, and also knowing that these are skills that not all the time are taught in classes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the best ways to gain experience in product management is just building your own thing. So you have like a bunch of friends that you probably work with in classes or maybe like outside of classes. And honestly, you guys can come from different majors. Someone can be an anthropology major, someone can be a math major. It doesn't really matter. But I think one thing that you find at colleges is that the creativity is out of the roof. Like it's through the roof, and everybody has all these great ideas. So if you guys can think about a problem that you're noticing, it might be on campus, it might be outside of UVA, just talk to your friends and figure out, hey, is this something that we can develop a solution for? If so, is that solution an app? And if it's an app, like how would we build that? And just going through that process on your own and figuring out, how do you build this app? Like, how do we build the solution? Do we have a customer base? How do we get research? How do we do all this stuff? It's going to get you so much good practical, experience in that field. And I think the other really cool thing about that is, when you're sitting down with interviews and like your interviewer is like, oh, what sets you apart from other people? You can be like, yeah, well, my friends and I figured out that I don't know. This is like a totally random example, but there's no meal delivery. I'm sure this isn't the case for like Coops. And I don't know why you would want to eat Coops food. I'm actually not sure. But you can say like, we developed this delivery app and like we tried it and this was our findings and like this is how we built it. That's going to set you apart and show that you have not only like initiative, but also that you really care about the things that you work on. And it's also just a really fun experience, working with your friends in college and like just shooting ideas around is something that you can only do for a short amount of time in your life. So the more that you can integrate those things and get some good practical experience, the better.
Awesome. And I know that this summer is especially a good time to be kind of getting experience and just trying different things, because we know that we're kind of in unprecedented times. I've seen a lot of speakers kind of talk about, when you're in an interview in the future, there might be a question of, what did you do in the summer of 2020? How did you respond? And you want to have kind of like a good answer to them, not that you just sat back and did nothing, but that you used the time. So it's definitely good advice.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely agree with that. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, students, feel free to put questions in the chat. We're kind of nearing the end here. So if y'all have questions, go ahead and put them in there and we'll kind of start going through those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did want to just add one more thing to that. You can attend product management conferences online for free. Product School puts together a lot of free product management conferences. So if that's something that you're interested in, honestly, I think ProductCon was like a month ago or something like that. It was totally free and virtual. Feel free to sign up, sit in a few sessions, figure out if that's something that you like. And then, if there's something that really like makes you interested and you're like, hey, that speaker was a total badass and I want to connect with them further, shoot them a message on LinkedIn and just be like, hey, I'm a college student. This is really interesting to me. Can we schedule some time to chat? I would love to hear more about your story. I find that people, if you phrase it the right way and you try like to network with them and understand their story a little bit more, they're always happy to chat with you and, help you figure out your own life path if that's something that they can help with.
Yeah, definitely. Informational interviews go a really, really long way. And that's really cool. I've never heard of Product School. Are there any other kind of like resources or blogs or websites that you kind of suggest students who are interested in this area kind of keep up with?
Yeah, absolutely. Product School helps. Product Hunt is a website that will aggregate the best new products in tech and kind of go over what they do. And you can take a look at them and see if you want to critique them yourself. And that's a good way to practice some product management skills as well. Trying to think of other really good ones. I think General Assembly has a couple conferences as well for product talks, or they hold some product talks as well. But yeah, those are the big ones that I think I've seen more than anything else.
Very cool. So it looks like we have another question in the chat. Do you think your work was especially notable at Deloitte that made the recruiter reach out?
I don't think anyone outside of Deloitte knew what I did. There were a lot of times that I didn't even know what I was doing at Deloitte in terms of like, just layers of, confidential client information and all that stuff. I think the reason the recruiter reached out to me honestly was because Deloitte is a feeder company for other companies. So you'll hear this a lot with consulting. You spend 2 years doing it, and then sometimes you can leave and like you have a good network to build on, and recruiters will reach out to you and say like, hey, I noticed you have this experience. Like, are you interested in this role? It makes the conversation a little bit easier. I think right now, as I'm thinking about my next career move and like what life might look like post Facebook, I do get hit up by recruiters, but now I'm much more not necessarily picky, but I'm much more in control of like what I'm looking for. And I think that means that, even if a recruiter reaches out to me, sometimes it makes more sense for me to reach out directly to people who work at the company and figure out like, hey, like, do you like your role? What are you working on? What's the culture like? And getting that information from someone directly as opposed to a recruiter who might be really helpful and give you a lot of good information, but honestly is just going to show you kind of the best picture of the company. Would getting certificates from product school help? No, don't do that. There's an issue right now, I think, in Silicon Valley where you see a lot of like boot camps for really good things like coding. So if you're interested in coding post college and you got like an anthropology degree and you're like, hey, this is something I want to pursue, but I don't have any experience, coding boot camps can be really, really great and honestly wonderful ways to break into the field. Similar with design, I've seen design boot camps for people who want to switch careers halfway through their career, and that can be really helpful. The issue with product management is that it's something that you can really only learn on the job or through like side projects like we talked about. So in that situation, product school might give you like some good background on like product management, but it's not a guarantee that you'll get a job. And for the amount that they charge, I don't really think it's worth it, to be quite honest. That being said, there are helpful certificates and programs that people will put out there. But again, I would just talk to other product managers and figure out if you need those, if any. I know for a while I was thinking about like a CSPO, which is Certified Scrum Product Owner certificate. And I talked to a few product managers and they all said, no, that's really not that useful. And like, it's expensive. So I wouldn't recommend it, but it depends on the company. It depends on the industry. So before you sign up for anything and decide like, hey, I want to spend a couple $1,000s on a product or on a, certificate or anything like that, talk to other product managers and see if it's something that you actually need.
Really good advice. And the other question that came in here, what are some tips for networking in college and in consulting?
That is a really good question. I struggled a lot with networking at first because I would go to these giant events held by like Accenture and like Bain and stuff like that. And I'd be like, okay, there's a ton of students here and they're all going to talk about the same thing. And like, I don't know if I can make a genuine connection with someone. I think that's not the right way to think about networking. I think sometimes what helps is figuring out, are there events like coffee chats that are being held by companies where you can talk to someone individually and just get some questions answered, and just go with the intention of not that this person is going to help you get your foot in the door or anything like that, but just that person is, able to share some information about what their experience has been like and how they got there, and just be willing to sit down and learn. I think the more that you go with the intention of like, oh, I'm going to get a job at this company because I go to this coffee chat is not really great. But if you're going and just trying to connect with people and understand, hey, this is a really interesting path that they had and they learned a lot. And like, here's how their experience at UVA related to how they got into this field, and trying to make that genuine connection with them that's a much better way of networking, I think. And I guess post-college and like in your first job as well, LinkedIn is honestly such a great resource. I can't tell you the amount of times I've looked up people who went to UVA at different companies, and I've sent them an invitation to connect. And I said, hey, I went to UVA, you went to UVA. I'm really interested in this company or in this role. Like, could we chat for a couple minutes? And I think almost every single time I've done that, the person has reached out and been like, yeah, like let's grab coffee or chat and, let's, talk about this. Use UVA to your advantage. If there's an alumni connection at a company, chances are they're more than willing to sit down and talk to you.
Really, really good advice. We held an event last month called "Who's in Your Network," and basically it was all about exactly like what you're discussing, about the importance of genuine connections and like reaching out not to get a job, but to learn information and maybe something will come out of it. And like just the power of LinkedIn, you can find a ton of cool people on there. So students, I definitely highly recommend y'all use that. And I believe that recording for Who's in Your Network is on YouTube. The Career Center has a YouTube channel, and that recording should be there if y'all want to go back and watch that for some more tips.
Yeah, the Career Center is an indispensable service and resource. So please use the Career Center where you can. They helped me a lot when I was in college with getting internships, and my resume was trash before I went to the Career Center and got some advice on it. So definitely use them when you can.
Yeah, thanks for the shout out. Yeah, Meg just put the YouTube link to Who's in Your Network in the chat. So if y'all are interested, feel free to go to that. But students, feel free to keep putting your questions in the chat here. Jonathan, I might just kind of like open it up to you to kind of say, any pieces of advice or things that you want to share about your role, your background, experience thus far.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll just put the disclaimer out there. We can also talk about life after college in the professional world, like what the transition is like. If you guys want to talk about San Francisco or Washington, D.C., I'm super happy to talk about that. But I think, yeah, kind of one of my big pieces of advice right now with like new students and also people looking for jobs, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Job rejection is no fun and it stinks. And you're just kind of like, why doesn't this company want me? Like, I'm a good student, I'm a good person, like all this stuff. But you just kind of have to realize you just need one company to say yes. You don't need like every place that you apply to give you like the thumbs up and give you a job offer, because that's not really realistic. But the more times that you put yourself out there and you figure out like, I bombed that interview, but like, here's why I bombed it. And you learn from those experiences, the stronger of an applicant you're going to be until, eventually you've had so much practice that by the time you sit down for an interview with a company that's a really good match, you're going to crush it, just knock it right out of the park, and they're going to extend you a job offer. But in order for that to happen, you have to go in with kind of a humility mindset and be okay with failing. And even in your first job and your jobs after that, it's going to be something that is a constant lesson. You're going to fail in whatever you do, but failure is such a good teacher, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there and try new things. And if it doesn't work out, figure out why it doesn't work out. And ultimately you'll just become a stronger, performer and a better person for it. And then I guess one last thing is tech has a bit of a big learning curve sometimes, and something that I was worried about, but it's also just so much fun to be in this industry. You work on things that are crazy cool and top of mind, and like when you're out in Silicon Valley and you see like weird little robots driving on the sidewalk delivering sandwiches, and you're like, why the hell does that exist? And you find out why, and like, you see all these products that are being built. It can be really exciting and something that really energizes you if you're interested in that. So don't let the learning curve scare you or anything like that. Everybody learns at different rates, and it takes a long time to get acquainted with some of the information, but if this is something that you're passionate about and you're interested in, go for it.
Very cool. Since nobody's asking about San Francisco, I will ask, what is your favorite part of living in San Francisco? Apparently you were not planning to move to California. What is the best part? And I know last time we had a conversation like this, I was kind of fascinated with the Facebook campus. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was in high school, I always wanted to live in LA because I wanted to go to the beach. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be one of those guys that like goes to the work and then goes to the beach at like 4 p.m. and just hangs out. So when I got this job offer, I was like, oh, San Francisco. Yeah, they have beaches. Like, great, I'll go out there. The beaches in San Francisco are so cold. It's like freezing. You can't like jump in the water. So don't do that. But one of the really cool things about San Francisco is that there's so many parks. On the weekends, you just go to parks with your friends and like you hang out and picnic and you guys just hike and stuff like that. And there's all this culture and really great food. So it can be an expensive city, which can be kind of a drag, but there's just so much rich culture and history and really cool outdoors things that you can do out here. I would say that's probably my favorite thing. And then what was your question about the Facebook campus?
Yeah, just what's it like? I was fascinated last time, so I want to hear you talk again about it.
It's kind of like going to a university almost. There's a bunch of different buildings and it's massive. There's a lot of free food and like free swag and snacks and stuff like that. It can be overwhelming the first time you go because it's like I got lost for I think the first month of work, but it's really exciting. And I think that's one of the perks of working at a large company is you get to experience these like really big campuses. Yeah, and if you know the whole coronavirus thing ends in like the next 6 months and you guys are out here, contact me. I'm allowed to bring guests to the Facebook campus, and I'm always happy to show prospective students who are interested in tech careers kind of what the campuses look like. So as soon as that opens up, and if anyone's out in California, please message me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to show you guys.
Cool, that's awesome. Students, we are wrapping up. I don't have any more prompts, but if y'all don't put any more questions in the chat, then we are gonna wrap up here in the next few minutes. So if you have a burning question, now is the time to ask it. Or Jonathan, if you have any other stories or projects that you want to talk about, feel free.
Trying to think of good stories that I have. Um, hmm. Can't think of much right now.
Totally fair. I put you on the
Oh,
spot.
no, it's totally cool. One thing I forgot to mention, accessibility is really important and something that I didn't learn about at Deloitte, but I learned a lot about in the tech industry. So that's accessibility is just building features and building products for people who might have difficulty using them. So think of people who use screen readers who might be blind, or sorry, might be deaf or blind, people who might have like worse operating systems and like lower end phones and things like that. Accessibility is really crucial, and if you want to kind of start to learn about that, there's a lot of good articles that you can read online. But I think ultimately when you're approaching a problem in tech, approaching it with empathy is really crucial. So anytime that you think of your work, if you can think of the end user in mind and be a little bit more empathetic about what they're trying to solve for and the issues that they're facing, I think it's going to make the world a better place. And it's definitely something that Silicon Valley is reckoning with right now. And I think we definitely need more people who are accessibility minded.
That is an awesome piece of advice. Thank you for sharing that.
What was the worst thing you ate at Facebook? I had this banh mi sandwich that was really bad. I don't know if it's just because I didn't like it or if it was like objectively bad, but that's like the only bad thing I think I've ate at Facebook.
Crucial question. Students, I won't keep Jonathan too long if y'all don't have any other questions, but it sounds like he is more than willing to connect on LinkedIn if y'all want to do another informational interview. Is there any last words that you want to share, Jonathan?
Nothing that I can think of. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Drop your name and where we met, and I'm super happy to help you guys in your careers as much as I can. And yeah, enjoy UVA while you can. It's such a magical experience, and I miss UVA almost every single day. And Charlottesville is such a wonderful city. So I know everything's like remote right now, but as soon as you go back, enjoy it as much as you can. It's a special place, and it really sets you up well for your career.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending this afternoon. I hope you all have a great evening.
Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate you having me.